A big thanks to Lexar for sponsoring this week's video. So in this video, I'm going to talk all about something that's often forgotten in landscape photography. Morning everybody, fantastic to see you all again. I've got a new desk, a large desk, and it's absolutely fantastic. So I'm quite excited. Small things. Okay, so what I want to do in this video is talk about something that I think everybody gets excited about, but then it sort of gets forgotten about in the moment, and that's the sky and how much the sky can influence your photograph, your composition, and how it can make such a really big difference to the ultimate image that you produce. You know, the sky can do a huge amount of things, but I didn't always realize that. If you look at this photo from about 15 years ago, you can see that the sky, I thought the sky looks good, but it was a bit of an afterthought. I mean, the photo's terrible, but the sky is pretty terrible as well. I've chopped it off wrong at the top. There's a bright spot. It just doesn't really work. And the way that you interpret the sky can change the mood, it can change the balance, it can change the overall composition. So I've got some photos here. So if you take a look at this one, you can look at this photo here, it feels warm, it's just the end of the day. But if you expand out a little bit and include the blue sky, it tells a slightly different story to the composition. You can see that, this is maybe a clearing storm rather than more of a moody storm. And by just changing the way you interpret the sky, including waiting a little bit, then you can really impact your photos. And what I want to do today is go through 7 things that I think can make a big difference to the way you photograph landscape photography when you think more about the sky. Okay, so let's get into them. The first one is shapes and patterns and how you interpret patterns. Now, not every photo is going to have an amazing shape like this porthole in the sky here from the Faroe Islands, which is unbelievable, as I'm sure you can appreciate. And it's pretty obvious when you have something like this that that's the thing that you're going to photograph and make the main part of the image. But sometimes it's just a little part of the sky and how that is reflected in the landscape. So this was on the Isle of Skye, and you can see I had this really interesting rock formation. But then what I realized is that the sky, or a cloud in the sky, was coming over and it was starting to form a shape that represented this rock as well. And I'd originally just chopped off a little bit more of the sky. So I just added a little bit more to include this cloud here, and you can see that this makes a big difference to your photos if you do this. This is another example here, which was this cloud coming down. I've shown this photo so many times. It's this claw coming down, but you can see from the video here, it lasted such a small amount of time. I had such a small amount of time to grab it that you've got to be on your toes. You've got to be looking out for those opportunities. Again, this is a similar thing in Lofoten in Norway, and you can see that this cloud just changed here and almost like it was just touching the landscape. But I've got a lot of photos prior to this happening where this wasn't the same, and it just didn't create such a powerful image. So just looking at how the cloud reflects the land can make a big, big difference. This is a good example. So this was in Scotland. And it's maybe not so obvious, but this was where there was a cloud that looked quite good in the sky, but wasn't so obvious. And you could have quite easily maybe composed this in a way that you didn't have this repetition between the sky and this leading line of the landscape. But by having those repetition of shapes between the sky and the land, it can create a much more powerful and dramatic photo. So I'd really recommend that you concentrate on that and think about that, because it really does help. And it doesn't have to be the sky as in clouds, it could be the sky as in the aurora, like this shot here. And I got really lucky with this, but I was taking a shot. How this came about is that I was taking a shot, and I shot the landscape before the aurora came, and I saw this leading line of snow. And then when the aurora came, I went back to this leading line of snow because I thought, actually, the aurora is making the same type of pattern as it. And then I just took a lot of shots until it looked perfect. And again, I had a lot of ones that didn't quite work, but this one looked fantastic. Okay, let's go on to the second one, which is just about waiting and looking for changes. And in fact, let me just get a print. This print here, probably can't fit myself in the image here, but this image here, which I actually just shared a few days ago on social media, but this print here is probably one of my favourite images. It's certainly the best-selling print on my website. Still available for sale in certain sizes. But the clouds here, I had to wait for to get right, and I'll just put this down. Yeah, so the sky was changing so much when I was there. Not just the bit on the mountain, but the bit in the background, and it changed the mood of the shot. And you can see by these progression of images that the mood changes as I'm taking that shot. And quite often, that's the case. As photographers, we need to always be more patient. I'm the least good at that. I always want to move on to the next shot, but I have to tell myself all the time that I've just got to wait and see what happens, especially if you've got a really good scene where the clouds are moving quite quickly. Just have a think about that. Take your shot, think, oh, I've got a great shot there, but think, will there be a better shot if the clouds move, if something changes, maybe there's a bright spot that you don't want, or maybe there is a set of clouds that are coming through that could reflect some pattern in the foregrounds. And it can really impact your photo, and it can take it from one level to the next if you wait around and are a bit patient. This is another example here from the Faroe Islands where I was taking this shot, and I have to admit I didn't wait for long here because it was freezing cold when we were taking these, and we were getting blown on the top of this mountain. But I did notice that these clouds were coming over and they moved quite quickly, and just as they were on top of the mountain I took the shot. Everyone will say, yeah, but that's fine when you've got amazing clouds. What happens if the sky is clear or if it's dull and flat? Well, you've just got to think about that in your composition. Now, it may not always be appropriate. I mean, obviously, if you have blue clouds and you're shooting in the Faroe Islands, then it is a little bit more difficult. Same with any dramatic location. However, you can do things. The first thing you can do is just crop out the sky. So, think it's dull and boring, don't include so much of it. Include more interesting foreground and just have that sky just as a small slither at the top. Like this one from the Faroe Islands where the sky wasn't super interesting at the time I took this. Or like this one here from Iceland where the sky was blue, there was just a couple of clouds though, and so I included a huge amount of foreground of this amazing black sand, and then just a little bit of the clouds, and I made sure I didn't crop that top cloud, which I'll come on to in a minute, and that can make a big difference. Or you can use that sort of undramatic sky, that sort of blank blue sky to create a negative space in your image. So for instance, this is a shot, actually, I think at the same time I shot that previous image of, I don't know who this is, I think it's Andy, one of the workshop attendees. I've probably got that wrong, so sorry if you're watching this and you go, no, it's me, comment below. But yeah, I've used the negative space of the blue sky to create a little bit more drama of, we'll call him Andy, just on the horizon there. And, that makes for a pretty spectacular landscape. And then also, you can use contrasting colours. So if you've got a flat sky, maybe that's reflecting some of the ocean colour, or, it's just got a blue tinge to it. And in this case, I used these red houses in Lofoten. And then again, I did the same with this one. I had this really boring sky, but by using the red huts at the bottom of the image, I could include some of that sky. And I've just composed this in a way that I've got opposing blank spaces. So I've got the blank space of the sea at the bottom left and the blank space of the sky at the top right, and they sort of balance each other off really well. So that's a good idea, just to think about colours when you've got blue. If there is any red that you can have in your image, it helps. And you can also create drama with that negative space as well. So in this case, it was quite boring, this sky, but it was quite dark. So I used it, that negative space, just to create drama in the image. And whilst I talk about creating drama, we'll go into point number 4, which is creating drama in the sky. And that's something that we often forget when we're shooting landscapes. We think the landscape is predominantly the land, hence the landscape, but it can often be a good skyscape. And I do that quite a lot, where I've got a wide angle lens on and I'll include just maybe 1/5 of the land and 4/5 of the sky. So this was a shot from, I think it was sky looking back, was it? Yeah, I think it was sky looking over to Harris. And there was this cloud that was just amazing in the sky as it was coming across. I just wanted to include that as the main subject of the photo. So I included that at the top of the image, and then it just creates drama. It just creates something that's just a little bit more special about the image. And then again, this one was in the Faroes, where it's probably about 1/3 sky and 1/3 mountain. And yeah, this was incredible. The rain was coming through here, and there was so many birds. If I zoom in closer, you can see just how many birds there are in the scene. It was really spectacular, but this looks really dramatic. But if you zoom out even further, and this was taken a little bit later, then you can see that you can create even more drama by just having a slither of land at the bottom and just predominantly the sky. And that's what tells the story. You know, it would have been really easy in this to just shoot a closer in shot, but by creating a bigger portion of the sky, I've created something that's so much more dramatic and created a much better image. So before I go on to the next points, which are really important and make a really big difference in your photography, especially when you're thinking about the sky, is I want to thank this week's sponsor, which is Lexar. And I use the 64GB CF Express card, which has got an amazing read speed, peak read speed of 1750. These Lexar professional cards are amazing. They also do an amazing 2000X UHS2 Lexar Professional SD card, which has got a read speed of 300 megabytes per second. So I'm going to be using these as well when I get my Z6 II, because that obviously takes an SD card and I want a fast one. So if you're shooting 4K footage, or you just don't want to fill up your buffer, then I definitely recommend that you go and take a look at these. There's a link in the description. They're designed for durability, so they're perfect for the landscape photographer. Okay, on to the next point, and that is all about shutter length and how that can have an impact in the sky. Now, this isn't something that I do, but I understand that, you know, people do enjoy to experiment with longer shutter lengths in the sky. I quite like the texture of the sky myself. So if you look at this shot I shot in Yosemite, I like the texture of the sky in this particular shot. I mean, the wind was blowing in the wrong direction, but I did do a longer exposure as well. And you can see it probably just didn't create such a good a mood as that first shot. But people like Peter Everson use longer shutter speeds all the time and create amazing shots. In fact, Mas sent me a photo as I texted him and said, Mas, I need a photo of a long exposure because I don't do them very much. But so he sent me this over, which is a fantastic example, because if the wind's blowing towards you and the clouds are going over the top of you and you do a long exposure of maybe 2 or 3 minutes, then you're going to get something like this. So thanks, Mas. The sixth one is all about edges and where to crop. Now, this is probably the most important because it's the thing that I get wrong the most, and I've seen other people get it wrong as well. And that's just where to crop. And cropping is quite difficult when you're in the field because you're probably focusing on so many things. But if you can just think about the clouds, if you have a cloud, you don't want to crop halfway through it. So this is a good example. It's not a particularly amazing shot. In San Francisco, there was these amazing clouds. I like this boat that was in the bay as the tide went out. And if you look at this, I've cropped halfway through this cloud. I've done that on purpose afterwards. Obviously didn't make that mistake in the field. But you can see that if I actually go and show the actual picture, it looks much better when I've got that lone cloud there on its own. Again, this is a shot where you can see the first image that I took, I didn't have enough room above the cloud on top of this mountain in the sky. and you've got to make sure that you give your sky room to breathe sometimes. You might want to cut a lot of it out, like in this case I don't want too much blue sky, but I've got to have some room for that cloud to go into, because otherwise it feels tight and constrained, and that's really important. And it's probably not so just important for cloud that or sky, but everything in your image, whether it's a tree or anything, you just need to think about, is there room to breathe in the image? And then, this is another good example where I did make a mistake. This was in Lofoten. It wasn't a particularly nice light, but I should have thought more about that cloud on the right-hand side, because it's really annoying that that cloud is cropped off. What I should have done is just wait, and that cloud would have moved one way or the other. If it had gone out of the frame, it would have been good. If it had come in the frame, it probably would have been even better, because it would probably added a sense of balance to this rock in the foreground. This is a good example where I was shooting Lofoten. In this case, this was one of the shots quite late on. I did get one that did work, as you can see here, but this one, the blue sky was coming in and it just created this really distracting element in the sky that I didn't really like. So you don't want those distracting elements. You want to be able to hold the viewer in to the image, which brings me nicely to point number 7, which is make sure you hold the viewer in the image. And you can see in this shot here that I took in Lofoten that it's a really nice shot of these receding mountain ranges, but this isn't the whole shot. If I just zoom out and show you the whole shot, you can see that there's this band of clouds at the top, and I've placed those there because they hold the viewer into the image. Your eye goes to those clouds and then drops down into the mountains, or goes to the mountains and then goes up to the clouds and then bounces back into the mountains. So being able to do that is really important. This is another good example of Bleetarn in the Lake District, where I've got these dark band of clouds at the top. Now you can do that afterwards in Lightroom, because you can just darken the clouds a little bit more if you've got the right type of clouds. But being able to hold the viewer in the image is really important. Okay, I've got some exciting news before I finish today. That's all the tips, but I've got some exciting news. It's free, so I'm not trying to sell you anything, but it's a free webinar that I'm doing later today if you're watching it today. That doesn't work if you're watching it tomorrow. Anyway, it's going on YouTube, UK time, 7 p.m. tonight. There's a link in the description. It's just going to be a discussion of me with case filters. I think it's Ruth from Photography Online that's doing the interview. And I'll just be chatting about anything she asks me, really. I don't have a clue what she's going to ask me, but I'll answer any questions she does. And you'll have a chance to ask me some questions as well. So make sure you come and join me there. And then the other thing is I'm on Clubhouse, which is an app. So if you're on Clubhouse, come and say hi, because I've only got about 8 friends. And that's going to be quite interesting, actually, because I'm going to be doing lots of chats on there with photographers that you'll be able to join into as well. So I think that's going to be a really exciting app to play around with. And yeah, so if you're on there, come and say hi. And that's it. Thanks ever so much for watching. Hope that's helped. Go and shoot some sky. I'll see you next Sunday. Bye.